With Messi nursing an ankle injury and no Jordi Alba due to yellow card accumulation, against Eibar, we should have expected a different look for Barcelona. Unlike the last match out, I didn't think it'd be a 3-5-2, but that's indeed what Ronald Koeman threw out there with Ter Stegen the captain, since none of the other four captains were starting and only Busquets was in the squad. Mingueza, meanwhile, the only Catalan and the only La Masia graduate in the starting 11, and I think that is something to note, but also a much bigger idea that we don't have time and probably shouldn't talk about here. When I saw the starting 11, I was initially worried about the ability for Barca to get the ball on net or to find opportunities and make opportunities, and kind of did prove to be true. You can call it a 3-5-2, but it really was more of a made-up formation of a 3-2-4-1 with the wing-back so high. Braithwaite is the target up top with Pedri and Griezmann underneath him, Dest and Junior Firpo adding width out wide. Griezmann starting the game as the focus of the attack, a nice switch ball to Dest in the opening minutes, and this is almost the last thing I'm going to say about Griezmann, because he was good for the first about 15 minutes of the match, and then you didn't hear a sniff out of him after that. So Griezmann, good start, nothing else much to say. In the early minutes of the game as well, Araujo goes down on a corner kick. It was a 50-50 whether or not this was a PK. Araujo was the only one to get a touch on the ball, and then the two players kicked up and threw him. So I understand why the referees, after the check with VAR, gave this a PK, but it didn't matter whether Barca got a PK or not, because Braithwaite joined the party of players who've missed penalty kicks this year, joining Griezmann and Messi as he sends his wide. So this match remains 0-0. This is a time where I think we should talk about Serginho Dest as well, because in that first half in particular, there wasn't a second half to speak about for him. He came off at halftime. Dest was not sharp to start this game. Poor final third balls, unable to clear his lines, a poor touch, coincided with some nice combination play and possession from Eibar as well. I think we've almost been building to this point that, for me, this is the worst performance we've seen from him in a Barca uniform. This, I think, is what his, as I've been talking about on the podcast in recent weeks as well, this is what his floor looks like. And I'm beginning to wonder over the last few matches whether or not he is in need of some kind of rest. Remember, this is the most football he's ever played in his career, especially at a top level like this. For Ajax, he was a backup, and he was rotated quite often with Ten Hag in Amsterdam. So to see him game in and game out, 90 minutes each and every time he goes out on the field because of Sergio Roberto's injury, Dest might need a rest in the same way that we saw that poor run of 2 or 3 matches from Pedri, that when he got his rest, he's been good since he got back. So I don't know how Koeman's going to do it, but I'd like to see, even before Roberto comes back, Dest get just a spot on the bench for one match, can even come on in the second half as a substitute, but I would like to see Dest just get a moment to breathe. Now, this offside goal, very much the same thing. I don't think VAR ruined this game. It was unlucky, sure, but it was an offside goal. Pedri's through ball was wonderful to Junior Firpo. More on those two in a second. The cross to Braithwaite in from Junior, and I can agree with the call, though. It felt too close to call, so I also understand if they had just kept it as a goal, but he was half a foot offside, and there was that image that you could clearly see that he was offside. Eibar, credit to them though, they were pressing in a 4-3-3. Mendilibar has them very organized, pressing either Pjanic or De Jong in Barca's half, and then willing to defend in their own half. Almost frustrating to see a team with a little something flopping around on the ground so much so, that being my critique of Eibar. Not even when they were up 1-0, when that was still 0-0, just flopping around, constant fouls by the Barca center backs as well, that Eibar were making sure that the referee saw and making the most of it each and every time. And that was every time Eibar cleared long. They were willing just to go down with any bit of contact with the center back, and the referee was calling this one very tight tonight as well. And I think Eibar did have to kind of rely on things like that. They didn't have Bryan Gil, who is on loan from Sevilla, and who, while he doesn't have the goals and assists to back up just how much he injects into that Basque attack, Gil has been their most impressive player, I think, so far this year. And yeah, the goals and assists, whatever, but without him, Eibar were lacking some of their normal attacking juice that they do have. Now, moving to the second half, Ousmane Dembélé comes on for Dest, as I had mentioned earlier. As I had said, a rough one for Dest, not helped by the fact that Eibar also were consistently throwing 2 down his side and made him make decisions which weren't the best decisions that he made today. That changed the Barca formation almost into a 4-3-3, which isn't that crazy because Mingueza did play as a right back with Barca B as much as he did at the center back position. Pjanic and De Jong then behind, and Pedri in front of them in a more conservative 4-3-3, not with just one holding midfielder, but the 2 double pivot with the attacking midfielder in front of them. But the story, I think, for the second half was a change of Dembélé. Only waited until his first touch in Eibar's half to take a shot that went wide. Then the 56th minute, Pedri takes advantage of Eibar falling asleep after a turnover, Dembélé, a shot right at Dimitrovic. De Jong, nothing on the follow-up. That's a chance for Barcelona. And then less than a minute later, Kike Garcia takes the ball off of Ronald Araujo, easily taken off by Kike. He barely had to fight for the ball, almost with one touch, pokes it away from Araujo, then scores 1v1 against Ter Stegen. An awful mistake by Araujo, should have played the ball earlier to Pjanic, but the credit to Araujo does come in the fact that he did make this naive mistake, as players who only have now less than a year of first-team football under their belt, but for him to have the maturity to say that I want to be the one to speak in the post-match, which, as we know, the veterans on Barcelona were more than willing to allow a youngster to do that if they're going to step up to do it. But Araujo, for me, in the long run, that if he can learn from this mistake, that maturity that he's showing in those post-match conversations is something that is going to stick with him even after these mistakes are gone. And hopefully he does get the opportunity to continue to work through these errors. But it's unfortunate that it is going to cost Barcelona some points. In the 66th minute, it's Pjanic for Coutinho and Griezmann for Trincao. And we know how those subs have been working out for Barcelona in recent matches. Now, this is a full-blown 4-3-3 with Trincao on the left and Coutinho as the left interior. But as much as I was skeptical of those two substitutions, the equalizing goal comes for Barcelona soon after their arrival. Coutinho's movement was really good, actually, leading up to the goal. I know I've been critical of him in recent weeks about his off-ball movement. He's actually working hard, these little 10, 12-yard mini sprints, working the space on the left with Junior and Trincao, leading to even more space on the left flank for Junior. The cross intended maybe to Pedri from Junior, but it goes past him to Dembélé, who finishes with confidence. So a lot of bright sides there, not only for Junior, who's trying to revive his career, but also for Dembélé, who comes back from his most recent injury and is able to get on the score sheet. Even a few minutes after that, Dimitrovic very lucky to not have a save off a Dembélé cross to ricochet off of Braithwaite's chest and potentially into the net, but again it goes wide. Braithwaite cannot find it at the back of the net. 82nd minute, Koeman, I guess you can call this an attacking substitution. It's Busquets on for Lenglet. Now Lenglet in the first half, that ball was being forced over to Mingueza and Dest side. That's how Barcelona were attacking, and Mingueza was the one spraying balls forward. But in that second half, Lenglet did switch the field twice to Dembélé. That was good to see from him. And Busquets basically just continued that model, setting up in a very similar spot that Lenglet was, just a little bit further as one of the double pivot. 86th minute, Pedri can't finish. Again, coming from the left wing, the attack. Coutinho gets his cross deflected. Pedri wide and cannot put the ball in the back of the net. In the 89th minute, your man of the match in Pedri does come off for Riqui Puig, and I don't know how much you can read or write about 5 minutes of action, and I'm probably reading too much into it, but maybe I'm reading just the proper amount into it. But I did notice that Puig had his jersey laid out from the first whistle in a way that he hasn't had for the last few matches, meaning I think he knew he was getting into this game late from the jump. And oftentimes, as we saw with Alenya last December, even without fans, this is a temporary goodbye appearance. That's my feeling, that he's going to go out on loan in January, and that's probably, especially after the injury to Coutinho, going to be the only thing that Barca does as far as transfers in or out of the club in the January month. 91st minute, Coutinho, as I said, goes down without contact, so Busquets switches the ball and Dembélé puts it in for Trincao, who is so close to having his moment, still waiting on his first Barcelona goal. Now for Coutinho, I'll say what we're all thinking. You never want to see a player injured, and it definitely makes me feel guilty that I selfishly feel bad about Coutinho potentially going down for a while, because I was hoping he would be sold in January in the summer. I know people are talking about that Liverpool clause where Barca are going to owe Liverpool money, but trust me, there is a lot that they're going to find in January about sunk costs, and even that 20 million euro to Liverpool, that might even be the least of Barca's worries. So I wouldn't even put too much stock in that. However, for Coutinho, a long-term knee injury will continue potentially to derail his career, and it almost makes it impossible to sell him as well. That number continues to go down and down and down, and he's on the books until 2023. So that's most likely, and you'd have to assume it's almost a 98% chance that that'll be way after Messi is gone from the club. And as I said, it probably means that a player like Coutinho, you would like him to be sold, but instead, as you catch my drift, that's not going to happen. But I think what's worse, with the way that Koeman has been managing the team, it doesn't really actually change much, the Coutinho injury. Puig, I'd say, is still likely to go out on loan, but this could change that, sure. But if you told me that Koeman would just still use less subs, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. He gets 5 subs, and he consistently uses 3, with a fabled academy in La Masia that it has, and having those, I'm not even talking about Puig and Alanya, I'm even talking about calling up even more Barca B players, whoever it may be. Conrad de la Fuente, still waiting on his La Liga debut. Callado, coming back from injury, he's a name that you keep hearing, and he seems to be starting to do well with Barca B. I'd like to see a good run of form, but hey, if it's April and Barca's still looking for answers in certain positions, Cayedo's another one of those names. Again, Conrad de la Fuente. There's options, and there are 5 subs, and Koeman continued to use 3 or 4 because, as we keep talking about, Barca have not put away these matches in the 70th minute or the 80th minute where you can just throw on younger players. Barca are still fighting for every point they've had this season. So to wrap this up, only bright spots for me. Pedri again, Junior showing life, Dembélé returning and looking lively, and Pjanic, I didn't even mention him, but I thought he was positive throughout the match. I thought it was one of his better performances, and his recent performances have actually seemed to be better and better, so I think it actually might have honestly been a fitness thing, and we cannot forget the role that COVID has played in this season. But Messi's reaction at the end said it all. That's 9 points from 27 possible points at the Camp Nou this season. If culés were there, though, in the crowd, I don't know if things would be much different, but I do know that they'd be letting the team know exactly what they think of him. And especially for Koeman, as Francesca said, it is almost a mixed review for socios and those in Catalonia at the moment. He is a club legend, and that does give him, with socios and those around the Camp Nou, a lot of leeway. But I think they'd be getting some boos, not even just for him, but for the team and the result that they have now. And I do want to flip it, finally, as you know, and give some credit to Eibar. 27,000 people in the city of Eibar. And so much credit always to this Basque club. I think about Real Zaragoza, Espanyol, Malaga, Las Palmas, Rayo Vallecano, Mallorca, Sporting Gijón, and Real Oviedo. And then down in the 3rd division, Deportivo La Coruña, Racing Santander. There are so many clubs that are much, much, much bigger and have a lot more history than Eibar. And yet, they've had ambition, and these results aren't a surprise. But long-term listeners and viewers know that I try to do my history homework, and every result they get like this, I know it's not a surprise because they've had this ambition, and they've been in the Liga now for a few seasons. But regardless of the circumstances, a bad Barca, no fans at home, regardless of all that, Eibar deserves credit for what this club has built, and each and every big result they get seems to set more history for them. So a lot of credit to Eibar, and almost a constant reminder that whether it's Valladolid or Cadiz, or Eibar, that some of those teams may be facing relegation, but La Liga have gotten better, and the likes of Xavi and Iniesta and Pep Guardiola and everything that Real Madrid and Barcelona from 10 years ago, when there was a duopoly in La Liga, those teams were so good that all these other clubs in Spain tried their best to emulate what those teams are doing well, and La Liga has gotten deeper and better every year since. And so, yes, it's a frustration to see that Barca have to fight for all 3 points, but I think it is a credit to La Liga this season, as disjointed as it is, that all of these historically smaller clubs are continuing to get results, and they continue to be tough tasks, not just for Barca, but for Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid. But the difference is that Barcelona are a perfect combination of finding new ways to be a disjointed team with disjointed football, bad luck, and naive mistakes. So Eibar, for me, deserved a point, but Barcelona, they shouldn't have dropped 2 points, if that makes any sense. A missed penalty kick, the disallowed goal, the talented players that Koeman has at his disposal. This should have been 3 points at home, but it wasn't, as I said, because I was told to expect dysfunction, but I do find it hard to accept the new ways that this team manages to drop points. So it's Sunday against Huesca, and the objective in my eyes hasn't changed. You need 3 points to stay within the proper distance of finishing in the top 4 and a Champions League spot. That's as bad as Koeman can do, or else I don't know what happens if he doesn't get a Champions League spot. For some brighter news, make sure you check out this week's podcast where Francesca and I talked all about the presidential election coming up in January, and I mean we went deep. Plus Messi's recent interview. In the meantime though, until next time, Forza Barca.